Intel patched 374 vulnerabilities in 2024 alone.
Wow.
That's more than one vulnerability per day.
Yeah, that's a lot.
If that doesn't screen constant threat landscape,
Right.
I don't know what does.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy stat when you think about it.
It is. Yeah.
Even for a tech giant like Intel. I mean,
Right.
imagine the challenges that smaller organizations are facing
Exactly.
with, way fewer resources.
And that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Diving deep into the latest cybersecurity news today, we're focusing on a particularly concerning trend.
Okay.
The blurring lines between nation-state cyberattacks and financially motivated cybercrime. Google's threat intelligence group
Oh, yeah.
is sounding the alarm,
Interesting.
saying this distinction is practically meaningless now.
Really?
They're seeing state-backed actors like those in Russia and North Korea using cybercrime tools for espionage, even regime funding.
So basically they're saying that cybercrime is a national security threat.
Yeah. It kind of feels like it begs the question of how do we approach cybersecurity now?
Yeah.
If a cybercrime group is bankrolled or even directed by a nation-state, does that make it a national security threat?
I mean, it seems like it.
Where do we draw the line?
Yeah, where do you even begin to draw the line?
It challenges the traditional separation we've had.
Right.
Does this mean every ransomware attack needs to be treated as a potential act of war?
I don't know.
I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
It feels like we need a more nuanced approach.
I think nuance is definitely key here.
Right.
But it really does raise the stakes.
It does.
And I think we can't afford to be complacent.
No.
Speaking of high stakes,
Yeah.
Microsoft had a busy Patch Tuesday
Oh, boy.
addressing over 50 vulnerabilities.
Wow.
One wormable flaw in Windows LDAP servers.
Oh, no.
That's CVE 2025-21376.
Okay.
And a critical zero-day CVE 2025-21418, giving attackers system privileges are particularly concerning.
So if I'm understanding that correctly,
Yeah.
an attacker could potentially exploit that wormable flaw to spread malware across a network without any user interaction.
Potentially, yes.
That sounds pretty scary.
It is.
It is.
That's why patching is so crucial.
Right.
These vulnerabilities are ticking time bombs,
Yep.
and attackers are actively scanning for systems that haven't been updated.
It's like playing whack-a-mole, isn't it?
It really is.
You patch one vulnerability and another one pops up.
Yeah, and it can feel very overwhelming.
Yeah.
But staying on top of patches is one of the most effective ways to mitigate risk.
Okay.
And, it's not just Microsoft either.
Yeah.
Adobe patched 45 vulnerabilities.
Gosh.
Some with remote code execution risks across products like Commerce and Design Illustrator and Photoshop.
So lots of patching needed there.
Yes.
Anything else we need to be aware of?
Yeah, OpenSSL had a high-severity vulnerability.
Bro.
CVE 2024-12797, discovered by Apple.
Wow.
This one could allow man-in-the-middle attacks,
Right.
which could compromise sensitive data transmitted over the network.
Oof. It seems like every week brings a new wave of critical patches.
It does.
How are organizations supposed to keep up with all of this?
It's definitely a challenge. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's a lot to manage.
Yeah.
But prioritizing patching,
Yeah.
especially for those critical vulnerabilities,
Right.
is absolutely essential.
Got it.
It's the foundation of any good security posture.
So the foundation.
The foundation.
Okay.
And, don't forget about basic cyber hygiene either.
What does that mean?
So things like strong, unique passwords, multi-factor authentication, and regular security awareness training for employees.
Right. Like just the basic blocking and tackling.
Exactly.
All right. Those are good practical tips.
Hopefully.
Now let's turn our attention to some positive developments.
Okay. I like those.
The US, UK, and Australia are hitting Russian web hosting provider Z servers with sanctions for allegedly supporting the Lockbit ransomware group.
Wow. That's interesting.
It is.
This is a big deal. It signals a willingness to go after the infrastructure
Yeah.
that enables ransomware operations, not just the groups themselves.
Right.
For too long, these groups have operated with relative impunity.
Yeah, they have.
But this move suggests a potential shift in strategy.
It does. But do you think this will actually deter these groups, though? They seem pretty adept at finding workarounds
They are.
and adapting to new challenges.
Yeah, you're right. It's a cat and mouse game.
It is.
But sanctions can disrupt financial flows,
Right.
limit access to resources, and make it more difficult for these groups to operate.
Okay.
It might not be a silver bullet,
Right.
but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see how it plays out.
We will.
In other positive news,
Okay.
Europol successfully took down the 8-base ransomware group.
Wow.
Any win against ransomware is a win for all of us, right?
Absolutely. I mean, 8base was a ransomware as a service operation, which means they were essentially providing ransomware tools to anyone who wanted to use them.
Wow.
Disrupting these operations is crucial because they lower the barrier to entry for cybercriminals and make ransomware more prevalent.
So taking them down is a big win, for sure.
It is.
Now let's move on to SAP,
Okay.
which released 21 security patches, including 6 high-priority fixes for critical vulnerabilities in products like NetWeaver Business Objects and HEN.
Uh-huh.
The most severe flaw, CVE 2025-0064, allows attackers to impersonate users in business objects.
Oh, that's a problem.
It is.
Impersonation attacks can be really hard to detect.
Yeah.
I mean, if an attacker can successfully impersonate a legitimate user, they can potentially access sensitive data, bypass security controls, and cause all sorts of havoc.
It sounds like we need to add identity and access management to our list of essential security practices.
For sure.
Alongside patching and basic cyber hygiene.
It's all connected.
It is.
Yeah.
On a slightly different note,
Okay.
the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, put 17 election security staffers on administrative leave amidst a review of their roles.
Interesting timing. Given the increasing cyber threats targeting democratic processes, this move could have significant implications for election security.
Yeah, it's definitely a development we need to watch closely, speaking of things that make you go, a hacker claimed to have 20 million OpenAI credentials.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Did you?
Yeah, that caused quite a stir in the community.
It did.
But thankfully, OpenAI found no evidence of a breach on their end.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the credentials seem to have been obtained through malware.
So a false alarm then?
It appears so, but it's a good reminder that even if a platform itself isn't breached,
Right.
your credentials could be compromised elsewhere and used to access your accounts.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It highlights the importance of strong, unique passwords and good credential hygiene.
Right. Speaking of compromised accounts, we have the case of Lee Enterprises,
Oh, yeah.
the publisher of over 350 U.S. newspapers. They suffered a cyber attack on February 3rd.
I read about that one.
Did you?
Yeah, it caused some major disruptions to their operations,
It did.
impacting printed newspapers, subscription services, and even internal systems.
Wow.
While it hasn't been officially confirmed as ransomware,
Right.
the incident highlights the vulnerability of critical infrastructure, even in industries we might not traditionally think of as primary targets.
It's a reminder that no one is immune to cyber attacks.
Absolutely.
And then there's the case of Eric Council Jr., who pleaded guilty to hacking the SEC's X account.
Formerly Twitter.
Formerly Twitter. That's right.
Yeah.
He managed to exploit a SIM swapping attack to gain access,
Oh, wow.
which highlights the importance of securing our mobile devices and accounts.
Yeah, for sure.
SIM swapping attacks are becoming increasingly common,
They are.
and they can have serious consequences.
Right. In this case, his fraudulent post claiming SEC approval for Bitcoin ETFs
I remember that.
temporarily inflated Bitcoin's value.
Yeah, it did.
That's not just a minor inconvenience. It shows how seemingly isolated cybercrimes can have ripple effects across financial markets and even national economies.
It's true. It really underscores the interconnectedness of our digital world
It does.
and the potential for even small incidents to have far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, and this brings us back to our earlier discussion about the blurring lines between cybercrime and national security.
Right. If relatively simple attack like SIM swapping can manipulate financial markets,
Exactly.
imagine the potential for chaos if a nation-state were to leverage more sophisticated cybercrime techniques
Oh, yeah.
for economic disruption.
That's a scary thought.
It is. It's a sobering thought.
It is.
And it highlights the need for a more coordinated and comprehensive approach to cybersecurity.
I agree.
One that breaks down the traditional silos between law enforcement intelligence agencies and the private sector.
We need to be working together.
We do. So what can organizations do to protect themselves in this increasingly complex threat landscape?
That's the million-dollar question.
We've talked about patching and basic cyber hygiene, but is there more?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, organizations need to adopt a multi-layered approach to cybersecurity.
What does that mean?
So that means implementing a combination of preventative detective and responsive controls.
Okay.
It also means thinking beyond technology and considering things like employee training, incident response planning, and even cyber insurance.
So it's not just about buying the latest security software and calling it a day.
No, not at all. Security software is important,
Right.
but it's only one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
You need to have a holistic strategy
Right.
that addresses all aspects of your organization's security posture.
That makes sense. But it can be overwhelming,
It can.
especially for smaller organizations with limited resources.
Yeah, I understand that.
Where should they start?
I would say the first step is to conduct a thorough risk assessment
Okay.
to identify your organization's most critical assets and vulnerabilities. Once you understand your risks, you can start to prioritize your security investments and develop a roadmap for improvement.
Good advice. Now let's talk about some specific areas where organizations need to be particularly vigilant.
Okay, sounds good.
We touched on ransomware earlier,
Yeah,
and it continues to be a major threat.
it's not going away anytime soon.
It's not.
Ransomware attacks are becoming more sophisticated and more damaging.
Yeah, it feels like we're seeing attackers targeting critical infrastructure, healthcare organizations, and even government agencies.
It's true, no one is off limits.
Right.
We've also seen some positive developments in the fight against ransomware.
Like what?
Well, the sanctions against Z-servers and the takedown of 8base are encouraging signs.
They are, but we can't afford to let our guard down.
But they can.
New ransomware groups are constantly emerging,
That's right.
and existing groups are constantly evolving their tactics.
It's a constant arms race.
So what can organizations do to protect themselves from ransomware?
Well, first and foremost, they need to make sure their systems are patched and up to date.
Okay.
Ransomware often exploits known vulnerabilities, so patching is crucial.
Right.
They also need to have robust backups
Ah.
and a tested incident response plan.
So if a ransomware attack does occur, they can restore their systems from backups and minimize the disruption.
Exactly. Preparation is key.
What about preventative measures? Is there anything organizations can do to prevent ransomware attacks from happening in the first place?
Absolutely. One of the most effective preventative measures is to implement strong email security controls.
Okay.
Ransomware is often delivered via phishing emails, so blocking these emails at the gateway can significantly reduce your risk.
Makes sense. Another area where we're seeing increasing activity is in the cloud.
The cloud, yeah.
As more organizations move their operations to the cloud, attackers are following.
Naturally, they go where the data is.
Right. Cloud security is a critical concern.
It is a big one.
Organizations need to make sure they understand the shared responsibility model and are taking appropriate steps to secure their cloud environments.
It's a partnership.
It is it. Can you elaborate on the shared responsibility model?
Sure.
I'm not sure everyone is familiar with that concept.
The shared responsibility model essentially means that the cloud provider is responsible for securing the underlying infrastructure,
Okay.
while the customer is responsible for securing their own data and applications.
So it's not enough to just assume that the cloud provider will take care of everything.
No, definitely not. Organizations need to take an active role in securing their cloud environments.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, this includes things like implementing strong access controls, encrypting sensitive data, and monitoring for suspicious activity.
So it sounds like cloud security is a complex topic.
Yeah.
Any advice for organizations that are new to the cloud?
My advice would be to start by educating yourself about the security risks and best practices for your chosen cloud platform.
Got it.
There are many resources available online and from cloud providers themselves. You can also consider engaging a cloud security consultant to help you assess your risks and develop a security strategy.
That's great advice. Now, let's shift gears and talk about something that's on everyone's mind these days, artificial intelligence.
AI, yeah, it's everywhere.
We've already seen how AI can be used for malicious purposes.
We have.
Like in the case of the OpenAI credential incident,
Right.
AI is a double-edged sword.
It is.
It has the potential to revolutionize cybersecurity,
Yeah.
but it can also be used by attackers to develop more sophisticated attacks.
Absolutely. It's a powerful tool that can be used for good or for evil.
So can you give us some examples of how AI could be used maliciously?
Certainly, AI can be used to automate phishing attacks, create more convincing deepfakes, and even develop new malware that can evade traditional security defenses.
That sounds pretty alarming. Are we headed for a future where AI-powered attacks are the norm?
It's definitely a possibility, but the good news is that AI can also be used to defend against these attacks. We're already seeing the development of AI-powered security tools that can detect and respond to threats more effectively than traditional tools.
So it's a bit of an arms race then.
It is the side that can leverage AI more effectively will have the advantage.
Well, that's a thought-provoking note to end on.
Before we wrap up this part, I think it's important to touch upon a topic we haven't discussed yet, the role of international cooperation in combating cybercrime.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've seen some examples of this already, like the joint sanctions against Z servers. But there's always more that can be done.
Absolutely. Cybercrime is a global problem that requires a global solution.
Right.
We need to see increased cooperation between countries to share information, coordinate law enforcement efforts, and develop international norms of behavior in cyberspace.
That sounds like a tall order. Are there any initiatives underway to promote this kind of cooperation?
There are. The United Nations has been working on a set of cyber norms for several years now, and we're seeing more regional and bilateral agreements focused on cybersecurity cooperation.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges to achieving effective international cooperation in this area?
Well, one is the issue of attribution.
Okay.
It can be difficult to definitively attribute cyber attacks to specific actors,
Right.
especially when they are operating across borders.
Makes sense?
Another challenge is the lack of trust between countries,
Right.
particularly when it comes to sharing sensitive information.
Those are definitely significant hurdles to overcome, but given the increasing interconnectedness of our world and the growing threat of cybercrime, it seems like international cooperation is more important than ever.
It is. We're all in this together, and we need to work together to address these challenges.
Well said. And with that thought, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive into the latest cybersecurity news. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up.
That's good.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have from wormable flaws to AI-powered attacks.
Yeah, and the blurring lines between cybercrime and nation-state activity.
It's a lot to digest.
It is. So what's the one key takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that complacency is dangerous.
Right.
You can't just assume you're not a target.
Nobody is safe.
Exactly. Everyone needs to be proactive about their cybersecurity.
Okay, but where should people start? I mean, it can feel overwhelming.
It definitely can. But I always recommend starting with the basics.
Like what?
Make sure your systems are patched.
Okay.
Use strong and unique passwords.
Right.
Enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible. And be wary of phishing emails.
Right. Those are good, solid steps.
They are.
What about organizations? What should they be focusing on?
I think for organizations, a risk-based approach is key.
Okay.
Identify your most critical assets and vulnerabilities.
Right.
And then prioritize your security investments accordingly.
Don't try to boil the ocean.
Exactly. Focus on what matters most.
And don't forget about your people.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right. Employees are often the weakest link.
They can be, but security awareness training is essential. Make sure your employees understand the risks and how to protect themselves and the organization.
So it's really a combination of technology, processes, and people.
It is. You need all three working together for a strong security posture.
And of course, staying informed and adapting to the changing threat landscape.
That's where resources like Cybersecurity HQ are so valuable.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity HQ is an amazing resource for anyone in cybersecurity.
I agree.
Jobs reports, news insights.
They have it all.
They do. Their newsletter is read by over 70,000 professionals every week.
That's impressive.
It is. If you want to stay informed and stay secure, check them out.
Definitely a must read.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today.
It does.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed.
And stay safe.
And remember, Cybersecurity HQ.
Your hub for jobs reports news and a newsletter read by 70,000 plus professionals weekly.